Sansa Stark is one of the most hated, well, scratch that. She's one of the most misunderstood characters in all of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. The last we really see her in the books, and she doesn't have any POV chapters at all in Dance of Dragons, but the last we sort of hear from her is most recently in The Winds of Winter. And to be honest, she sort of just continues her plotline from A Feast with Crows. In this video, I'm going to go over all of the known leaks and confirmed interview spoilers for Game of Thrones Season 8 in regards to Sansa Stark. Hopefully we can come up with some sort of definitive endgame for her character. This video will contain spoilers. Real quick, before we get started, please slap a like on this video as the like goal is going to be 420. But also, I've recently launched a storefront over at teespring.com. Please, consider checking it out and grabbing some Sir Hunt swag, as I recently made this shirt in honor of our 40,000 subscriber landmark here on YouTube. Also, make sure you're subscribed and then make sure you have notifications turned on so that way you get alerted every single time I drop a Game of Thrones video throughout this long night. In one of the more recent interviews with Sophie Turner, the actress who portrays Sansa Stark on screen, she's actually been quoted as saying that, and this is not verbatim here, but wrapping up this show has been a major part of her life, and she's sort of left in shock and has been crying for weeks. She was asked if she was able to take something from the set, and she said she was. It was a corset. And Dan and Dave actually gifted her with the storyboard, and the scene that, the storyboard was from wasn't really disclosed, but she mentioned they wrote a long note on the back, and she mentioned that she was shocking and began crying for hours afterwards. So we can imagine that her ending, when you pair that information along with the information that we were given from Peter Dinklage, he actually stated in one of his recent interviews that, it was tragic, his ending was beautiful, and he actually got to see one of the actors who grew up on set, was basically a child when the show started. They were all present for that person's last day on filming. So, in my mind, he was directly referring to Sophie Turner. So when you take those two things into consideration, I think that Sophie, aka Sansa, may not make it to the very end, as we know that, Peter Dinklage, along with other actors, watched her last day on set. Now, I do want to step back here for a second, because not every single scene in Game of Thrones was filmed consecutively. So maybe Sophie Turner wrapped before some of the other actors, and Peter Dinklage was a part of that crew who saw her in filming. But aside from that speculation, there's another major thing that a lot of people take into consideration when guessing endgames for the Stark, and that is their direwolves. We all know that their direwolves are linked to their characters, a little bit more so in the books, but ultimately their fates will be intertwined with their direwolves. So for example, we have Grey Wind being shot at the Red Wedding, similar to how Robb was betrayed by his peers. Then you also have Shaggy Dog being beheaded in the TV show by Small John Umber, and Small John also turns over Rickon to Roose, which ultimately is his death sentence. Then we also have Summer dying in that cave, and the same thing can be said with Bran as a character. Bran Stark died that night in the cave and took on the persona of the Three-Eyed Raven. So then we get to Jon Snow and his ghost direwolf. Now, I think this one involves a little bit more theorizing here, but, Jon Snow is still dead in the books and has yet to be brought back. But for the most part, some people think that Jon works into the body of Ghost so that his mind is intact, and that eventually his body will be lowered into the ice cells, because there's a bit of foreshadowing with Jon Snow mentioning how the ice cells, keep getting filled, and Jon walks into there and sees himself in the actual ice cell. But all that aside, Sam says it best in that Jon Snow always comes back. So just like Ghost will disappear for a while, but he ultimately comes back. And that brings us to Arya and Nymeria, and then Sansa and Lady. Now, Lady dies early on. So in the books and in the TV show, well, no one really has wolf dreams other than Bran in the TV show, but in the book, Sansa is the only Stark who never really gets a chance to bond with her direwolf, because it's mentioned that all of the Stark children, all of Ned's children, are wargs, and they can see through the eyes of their direwolf. Sansa cannot do this. So Lady dies in place of Nymeria, because if you remember in season 1, Joffrey is attacked by Nymeria, which causes him to go and tell his father, and then obviously Robert wants a wolf to die, so Nymeria escapes, so they end up killing Lady in place of Nymeria. Now, just on a little side note here, I do think the fact that Nymeria spending that time developing her own wolf pack could be foreshadowing to the fact that Arya in the very end may go off and stray away from her House Stark wolf pack and try to make her own way. And I do want to mention that Ned was actually the one who killed Lady, so if we want to deduce from, the direwolf and Stark in-game parallels, that would mean that Sansa is going to die protecting one of her siblings at the hands of one of her family members. Well, that sort of parallel doesn't really fit this story. There's no way that any one of her surviving family members is going to, put an end to her. I just don't see that happening. Now, a situation that may arise that sort of relates to that could be that she dies by the decision making from one of her family members, and she willingly sacrifices herself to protect and make it so that her family members survive. Now, I do want to notice that Sophie Turner has gotten a tattoo that says the pack survived, and it's a picture of the direwolf sigil for which her house Stark represents. Now, one thing that you can take away from the pack surviving and the lone wolf dying is from two different things. Is that the lone wolf, the loner, the person who refuses to become a part of the group, will die alone. But also, you could take it as the lone wolf sacrifices themselves so that the pack survives. Sort of like all for one and one for all type of situation. So maybe there is a scene in which there is no other option but for Sansa to sacrifice herself and die as the lone wolf in order for the pack to survive. Now, before I proceed any further, the rest of this video will be rivaled with a bunch of spoilers. I think I used that word correctly, but anyway, you have been warned. Now, there's actually been a leak script / season 8 outline that has been passed down to me from the DMs over on Twitter, which you can follow me at Sir_Hunt. But in that outline, they mention that Sansa, along with Arya and Bran and a few of the other survivors from Winterfell, are down in the crypts of Winterfell. Now, there is a reason why they made it there, or why they went down there rather, and that's because the White Walkers have attacked Winterfell, and then Sansa ends up dying in the chaos that ensues after the Night King burns Winterfell to the ground. But Sansa's death somehow enables Arya and the rest of the survivors to escape. Now, there have been many different variations on this story, and main so because there was some filming at the normal location where they do all the filming for the Crypts of Winterfell scenes, and there were a few actors that were spotted in the location. So because that news has been confirmed through winteriscoming.net and through Watchers on the Wall, a lot of people, or a lot of fleekers rather, have been making up theories that involve some sort of crazy scene at that location. But what I've brought to you guys today for this video's sake is a different take on that information. Now, this person has stated that they want to remain anonymous, and they mentioned in their outline that the reason why Winterfell is burning is because it's not that it's attacked by the Night King, but that it's attacked by Cersei. Cersei somehow is able to get the Golden Company up to Winterfell in some super fast pace this season, and in doing so, the Golden Company ransacks Winterfell, and Sansa is taken as a hostage. Now, they mention that in their leaks that Sansa is not taken as a prisoner per se, but that she willingly turns herself in order for the other Starks to be able to leave. Now, as always, those leaks are to be taken with a grain of salt, but I'll continue on. So they say that all of this happens within the first 2 episodes, and once Jon and Daenerys arrive to Winterfell, they have to come up with a plan to get Sansa back. Like, Jon wants to focus on fighting the dead and all that. I guess that just gets thrown away because Sansa gets kidnapped. I don't know. But anyway, according to this outline, they say that Jon comes up with the plan, and that being that the only way to get Sansa back safely and to avoid as many deaths and loss as possible is for Jon to go and turn himself in place to Cersei. I guess everyone just lets him do this, but anyway, they mentioned that Jon would be a better prisoner because he's the actual king in the north, and that Cersei probably really wants to get rid of him because he's more of the threat. Now, for their evidence, they didn't have any behind the scenes leaks that weren't already known, but they mentioned that the pictures of Jon and Cersei that leaked all the way back in February of this year is confirmation of their theory. They said that the person that is seen in the back who was said to be Daenerys is actually Sophie Turner, and she was present in those scenes because there's some sort of prisoner trade-off. And the only reason why they confirmed that this scene wasn't fake and that, it's obviously out in the open and you can clearly see Cersei and Jon Snow and then Dan and Dave in the background, the only reason why they claim that that was not confirmed fake is because there's no way they would have carried all of that production equipment up to the top of those walls in Dubrovnik. Now, this leaker also cited their source from a recent interview with Sophie Turner where she mentions how she was filmed in Croatia, or pictures were taken of her in Croatia, and they put her in a fake costume. They basically stood around for half a day doing nothing, all in order to deceive the paparazzi. Now, when that interview came out, I remember reading the comments over on Reddit and the comments on where the article was posted at, saying she was never actually seen filming in Dubrovnik. So I'm assuming this person used that information to connect the dots. So altogether now, this person is claiming that Winterfell is sacked early on in episode 1 or 2. Cersei's the one who does this, and then Sansa and all of the remaining survivors there, because I guess they're overwhelmed by Cersei's troops, they are forced down into the crypts of Winterfell. Then Sansa turns herself in willingly and goes as her prisoner. Then once Jon and Daenerys arrive to Winterfell, they find out what happened, and then Jon goes to King's Landing to do the old switcheroo in Cersei's place. Now, I don't know why he would do this, because he's the king of the north. He knows the greater fight is of the dead. But if Cersei truly does kidnap one of his siblings, then I don't know what Jon Snow would do. I shouldn't really have to say this because I say this in all these videos, but these are meant to be taken with a grain of salt. They're nothing more than entertainment to help you all, and myself included, get through this long night. But as always, leave me your comments and your thoughts down below to let me know how credible or how ridiculous you think this leak is. I myself am not the biggest fan of Sansa. At first, in the first couple seasons, I honestly didn't enjoy her at all, and I kind of fast forward through the scenes of her on the show, and then the same with her book chapters. I wasn't just really interested until she started becoming who she was. Like in A Feast for Crows, I really thoroughly enjoyed her chapters. And the same with on the TV show. She really came into her own in season 5. A lot of people, can debate back and forth with me. That's just my personal opinion. And going into season 7 and season 8, I still don't enjoy her on screen as I do some other characters, but overall, she's suffered a shit ton, and she's been a great attribute to House Stark. Alright, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, make sure you're subscribed. The like goal is going to be 420. And also remember, check out my shop over on teespring.com. It's linked up here or down below in the description. Grab yourself some Sir Hunt swag. I want to thank you all so much for watching. Super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. My name's Mark, and this has been Sir Hunt's Reviews.